Hello. What's up? Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Randall and Danny. How are you guys
What
today?
up?
What's
Doing
up?
well, man. Excited for another
Welcome
live stream.
back. Yes, welcome back to another live stream. If I sound crazy, it's because I'm sick. So,
Oh,
do I
I
sound?
thought you just got like a voice
I got
change.
like a really deep voice today.
Yeah.
No.
Smoked a
How
lot,
are you
Been
smoked a
hitting
lot
guys?
all
up those
I'm
weekend.
steroids real hard.
yeah,
I see
I've
they're
been hitting
popular
those
now.
steroids. I went to
Yeah.
Mexico, picked up some steroids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Now I have a deep voice. So,
Nice.
anyway,
Hmm.
good morning,
The
guys.
question is, how'd you get the steroids back across the border?
Well, they call me a backdoor developer for a reason.
Nice.
Uh,
Did you ever see there's that good
it's-
movie with about them bringing over the drugs for AIDS back in the 80s that was really good
No,
oh,
for
te-
Mexico. For like
no.
treatment because they couldn't get them in the
Uh,
US. Yeah.
Texas
Real good.
Buyers Club?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Dallas Buyers Club.
Dallas
Yeah,
Buyers Club. One of those, yeah, in
bingo.
Texas area.
That was a good one.
I've never seen it. I'll have to check it out.
All
Anyway,
right, all right, all right.
hope you guys are doing well. Are you guys sick or is it just me?
Just you right now. Last week I wasn't. I was a little under the weather.
I
Nice.
was definitely under the weather earlier this week. I'm feeling a lot better now, so that's always good.
Nice. Right on. Yeah, there's just been something going around, so I think I have it now. The
Mhm.
itis. Anyway, good morning, everybody. It is Saturday, April 6th at 9:02 a.m. because we just talked about sickness for 2 minutes. Today,
Before we get into
oh
it,
man, he got me.
anybody who's listening or watching, let us know down in the comments. Have you been sick recently? Is it
Yeah,
really
have you?
hard to focus when you're sick? Is it a
Oh my
bummer?
gosh.
Does life seem extra difficult when it's sick? Or
Yeah.
do you just love being sick? Let us know down below.
Yeah, let us know how you're feeling today because I'm not feeling that great, but I'm gonna power through it. Yeah. So today's topic for our live stream is that coding is stupid, or not coding is stupid, but learning to code first is stupid. And I bet like if people are reading this, they're like, what the heck? This whole group is about coding. Why would that be stupid? So do you guys want to answer that?
hmm
Yeah.
Well, I actually want to give an analogy.
Okay.
So you see, over the past 5 years, maybe 10 years, drop shipping became very, very popular
Mm,
because, and one of the reasons that drop shipping became very, very popular is that you can just work to basically get customers. You advertise, you promote, you do whatever you need to do to get customers
mm,
because you don't need to have any inventory to start with. You just get the
true.
customers, they buy, and then boom, you send it to your customer. And however, if we compare that with brick and mortar businesses, we saw all of them go out of business during COVID because they had to buy supplies. They basically had a large overhead.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell you exactly why learning coding first is stupid right now. You can kind of think about it to see if you can piece it together. But having the overhead makes your business, your education, your career a lot riskier.
You know, I want to say that I think it's funny that I think we have this mentality of like, I want to do career X, whatever it is. Could be coding, it could be any other thing. And because of the way our education system's set up, we think all I need to do is learn those skills. And then based on merit, I'll get a job. But the
Hmm.
reality is very different, especially with jobs like coding, especially if you're doing freelance. You need a lot of other skills to succeed. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
times people come into it without those skills and then they struggle, then they get frustrated. They're like, well, why am I not getting work? Why am I not getting hired? Why am I not getting clients? So I think sometimes reversing that is actually more important. Building those skills first can make you very successful later because then you have them, right? And then you can leverage them while you're learning those skills later and, be better off.
Yeah, I get that. You made me think about this years ago when I went to college. Um, I used to think about people who I knew who didn't go to college. They just went directly into the workforce. They were like, I'm not gonna go get a degree in XYZ, whatever it is. They were just like, I'm gonna seek a job. And over the next 4 years, they worked a job doing whatever it is. when I was in college. And a lot of those people, when I graduated college, were just way better off because they had 4 years of experience under their belt already
No
and
debt.
no
Yep.
debt. Exactly. And they had real world experience. So they were more hireable because let's be real. When you go to college, get a degree, doesn't actually make you more hireable. In fact, if anything, it's like less because you don't have real world experience. And what you learn in college or in degree courses, or in our case, coding boot camps or whatever, is not really that applicable to the real world. I mean, I don't think there's much
Well,
that we did in our boot camp where I was like, man, this is what I actually do as a developer, you know?
also importantly, in college and in boot camps, most of the people teaching you have no real world experience either
Yeah,
because they're educators, right? And
exactly.
that's funny. Like I remember, I'll give you a good example. I remember my ex, she was working in pharmaceuticals, and all the scientists at the college university I worked at used to bother me to get her to come in and talk about getting hired in
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals because none of them worked in the industry. They didn't know what the hiring process was like. It changes all the time. And it's like, so you're not really helping people with the practical stuff that you need to actually move forward and be successful.
Yeah, I totally get that.
You guys have touched on some really important points. So, like, we all three went to a boot camp, kind of similar to university. You learn a lot of book knowledge. We learned a lot of different things. I mean, we learned SQL, we learned Python, we learned JavaScript, we learned HTML, CSS, we learned Azure, we learned Google Cloud, we learned AWS, we learned,
It was
you
so
name it,
Docker.
Docker. Yeah, we learned Docker, we learned
Jenkins.
Postgres, we learned Jenkins, you name it. We quote unquote learned
Learned
it.
it all.
And we put it all on our resume. But when push comes to shove, what do we actually use?
Pretty
Yeah.
much just a few of those. And
Mm-hmm.
then maybe once in a while, a couple for other projects. Like I think I've used Docker once since actually like doing the boot camp, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
great and it
Yeah.
has its place and its applications, but for the most part, it's not very useful.
You know what cracked me up about the boot camp too? It's like you have this, they had this structure of just dump everything on them so they can put it on their resume and it
Yeah,
appears like they know stuff, but you know nothing. Instead
yeah,
of having like a tailored, clear direction where you actually learn stuff that you can do things with, and then, because most people that code know they do a few things well. That's what they do.
yeah,
They might know other stuff, but it's funny.
yeah. Um, I mean, you made me think of something else too, which is like most companies when they're looking at resumes, if they see somebody who has 50 different coding languages on their resume, they pretty much instantly know that's a bunch of BS. Because most developers specialize in like one thing, and they want developers who are really good at one particular thing. When you have a million different coding languages on your resume and like on your GitHub or whatever, it just shows that, especially when you're like, if you look at somebody's GitHub, you can see what percentage all their code is in. And it's like, it's usually not going to be like 50 different coding languages. I mean, maybe if you're a super senior developer, you might have that, but most people don't have that. So I think it's deceptive. One of the things also that I was thinking about is, as junior developers, we fall into this trap of thinking like there's just a point where I'm going to be good enough to go start getting hired, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest deception of all, is that there's no point where you learn a certain amount of things and become hireable, right? In fact, I think that's what all of this is about, right? The reason why coding first is stupid is because you're you're wasting all of this time learning the book smart stuff before you actually make yourself hireable and make yourself like work on your sales skills, because at the end of the day, getting hired or being a freelance developer or whatever it is sales, right? You have to sell yourself, you have to sell websites, whatever it is, right? But you're at some point you're selling something. It's either yourself or you're selling people websites. And so I think that's why we sort of brought on this topic, because we want people to realize that learning to the sales part and the soft skills and the communication is actually the best thing you can do for yourself in the beginning, because you can start making money. Like there's tons, it's not 1999 anymore, right? You can make money selling websites using literally no code solutions and make a killing on it. I mean, I did that in boot camp. I made a post about this last week, which is I made $2,500 off of selling a Squarespace site and a recurring maintenance fee, right? And that's what we teach inside of our web dev incubator is how to do that. And it's actually a lot easier than I think most people realize, but it does take pushing yourself out of your comfort zone because that's the other thing is I think people get stuck in this like it's comfortable to just keep doing more and more tutorials and like dragging your feet and waiting to try to get hired because you don't have to put on that pressure of like, well, I need to go apply for jobs or like talk to somebody, right? It's very easy to click the easy apply button on LinkedIn and then like not pursue them, but that doesn't get you anywhere. We already know that. Everyone knows that.
Well, we've talked about responsibility before too, and I think this is a crucial part of it, right? Like it when you're in that stage of like I want to switch jobs and you're imagining this new career that you want to get into, it feels good to stay in that learning state sometimes because it feels like you're making progress, and then you can blame the world for not being hired, for not having a
Yeah.
job, for not moving forward, right? But you feel still like inside like you're making progress, and it's a dangerous thing to be in that place.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, getting out of your comfort zone, pushing yourself that way. I think it's really valuable too, because it can also teach you what you like about coding. Like it's
Totally.
surprising, but doing no code or doing like just doing sales part of it, you can learn actually what you want to focus on and then
Yeah.
concentrate your actual learning to maximize that and leverage that in the future.
Yeah. You actually made me think of another good point, which is using low code or no code solutions like Squarespace or WordPress. When you're a junior developer, there's a lot of like moving parts that happen behind the scenes when you're building like a web app. There's like databases, front end, back end, like business logic, all these different things, web APIs, right? And
UI
using
UX.
yeah, UI
Just
UX, right? Like actually designing something that looks and functions well. And using these low code solutions is actually a great way to learn all of this stuff before you start digging into the code because you understand what the user experience is on a good website, right? Because they have templates that you just use, right? You just use their templates, which are designed in functional ways that people already understand how to use a website. I mean, let's be real. When you go on Facebook, there's not like an instruction book they give you of how to use Facebook. Now, that's probably not a great example because Facebook
no.
isn't super user friendly, but most good websites, there's no instruction manual. There's no like tutorial of how to use it. It's intuitive. And that's what you want to do when you build websites is build intuitive websites. And so you learn a lot of that by using these low code solutions because you start to just replicate what they do over and over. And when you transfer that over into building like your own coding, your own websites from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, it becomes a lot easier. Like you understand, okay, login buttons should go in the top right corner, or a drop down menu should go in the top right corner, or there's always like a hero section at the top of the page, or this is how cards should align on mobile and on desktop, right? It becomes intuitive instead of you're learning to code. I mean, I remember when we did the boot camp, we coded a website from scratch and it was like the ugliest website I've ever seen in my life. And yes, it taught you the code, but the user experience, it didn't even make sense to us because when you're building it, you're like, why are we putting this thing here? And it's just the website was poorly designed, right? You learn the code, but it didn't actually intuitively work because they didn't design the site well in the first
Dude,
place.
one of the worst things about that too was when after we were done that, when I started actually, well, during the boot camp, when I started doing work on my own, like
Yeah.
they never even taught us really how to like effectively set up and mock up a design first so you have
Right.
something to work with, which
Mhm.
like once I realized that, I was like, that's why this has been so hard. Because like you have
Yeah.
no, you're not, you're just like, you can't just work from nothing. Because
Yeah.
what are you going to build, right? You need to design first. And like these things you learn so much easier by looking at like, because the whole point of low code solutions is that it's easy and they make good looking sites. So all of them are set up to be intuitive, clear, and aesthetically
Exactly.
pleasing, right?
And
I mean, that's the point.
you can probably talk about this too, Danny, because you've been working on that realtor app, right? One of the
Yeah.
things that you get faced with as a developer is you get handed like a Figma file usually, and Figma is just like a mock-up website, right? You can mock up like an app, a website, whatever it is in Figma. If you guys aren't familiar with it, I'm sure many of you are, but usually a company will hand you over a Figma design, which is created by a graphic designer, right? Or a web designer, not a developer, but a designer. And their job is to build essentially the screens that you as the developer are going to create. But one of the things that I notice that gets missed a lot with that is that there's nuances about animations, interactions, things like that that don't that the designer doesn't always catch, right? Like what happens when somebody, changes an input? Does it automatically save, or does there need to be a save button? Or when I hover over this, does it like scale up, or does the color change? Or how do I tell a user that they're hovered over a button, right? These are things that as a developer, you're responsible for bringing up to your team, right? And so having that experience is really important of designing first so that you can actually see like, okay, this is how somebody engages with this. Like if you notice when you go on any website, when you hover over a button, it's going to do some of those things, right? And so you need to know as a developer to ask the right questions to your team so that you can understand those things and build them the right way the first time.
Yeah,
So
no, I think that's a
here's
good
one of the
point though.
reasons
Yeah.
why here's one of the reasons why learning coding first is stupid. So there's this book called Die with Zero, and it
Mm,
talks about these people who build up an enormous amount of wealth that they can't spend by the time they die. And any money that's left over when you die, irregardless of if you give it to your children or to charity or whatever, in terms of your life, is lost. And that means that you literally wasted your life because you spent your life building up this money, this resource that you did not get to use. Well, every moment that you are learning coding and not making money, you are wasting your time because you
totally.
can literally from day zero start making money and learn coding. I remember back in the day when I learned SEO, I had no idea what I was doing. And every single person who knew what they were doing with SEO said, sell the service first and then you'll learn it. And it's the
And then
same
figure it
exact
out.
thing with web development, especially with no code solutions, because you can start from zero, knowing absolutely no HTML, no CSS, no JavaScript. You can sell a client a website and then learn while you're building it. And we teach you how to do that in Web Dev Incubator. We
Actually,
Yeah.
to
hold your
your
hand
point,
through it.
yeah, to your point too, I think that people often forget about low code solutions too is yeah, you might start using them with no code at all, but as you advance too and start learning how to code while you're also making money, you can start injecting your own code into them too, which is
Yeah.
really cool and making them totally unique, something no one could find on Squarespace or something, otherwise, unless they knew how the code in the background and knew how to actually create it themselves. So it's like you also open up this possibility of being able to do more than you ever could before. I just wanted to point out too, Chris shared a good comment. He said he was sharing his Squarespace page that he made with someone last night, and they were saying how easy it was to understand, and like that he was happy with that, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
they're going to give you a nice, easy layout, and it also just teaches you that. Because that's one of the hardest things. I
Totally.
mean, I know personally, like I'm not great at design, like at least especially when I started out, I wasn't. I never really had a great eye for it. So like that was always a hard struggle for me. And it wasn't until I started looking at like templates on like Squarespace and stuff or on Canva and stuff that I actually started to like get a better sense of like how to structure these things to make it like look good and function.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys made me think of another thing, which is this is when you actually go to apply for jobs at a company, or really do freelance work as well, the first thing that people are going to ask you is show me some projects that you've done before, right? And if you're going into that interview competing with other developers and your projects are the tic-tac-toe app and the to-do list app,
That are
you're
in the
already screwed.
documentation.
Like you're already done. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You have no chance. If you have in your portfolio, hey, even if it's like again, people can't even tell that it's a Squarespace site, but even if it's a low code solution site, if you're like, hey, I built these 10 websites for local businesses, that looks huge because they already know that you can communicate with a local business. They know that you can sell a website. They know that you've built something from the ground up, that you've thought about these things. And it's not just like I've followed a coding tutorial online and then built this.
Oh, you know what? You just made me think of something too. Another important point too is if you want to get into freelance, those low code and no code solutions are also important to know anyway. Because
Yeah,
sometimes, depending on your client, that is going to be the best solution for them.
totally. Most
Because,
clients do.
yeah, because guess what? Down the road, you can't just hand them a set of documents, of
Yeah,
HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that is their site. They aren't going to be able to do anything with that in the future. Unless you're
totally.
going to build them out a full dashboard that lets them change the site at will whenever they want, what are they going to do with it?
Which still won't happen because you need to
Yeah.
update it and like,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Yeah. No, it's totally true. I mean, for most businesses, they don't want to have to build a website from scratch because they don't know how to, but they want something that's easily maintainable by their team if they have to. And so that's a
Yeah, or
great
if they,
way.
for some reason, you're not around, or they can't afford to keep your
Exactly.
services in the future or something, right? They want to have something they can still work with and use.
Exactly. So I
So
think that's really
here's
the big
another
thing. Go ahead.
here's another reason why learning coding first is stupid. Because you cannot predict the future. Humans can't. We
Mm,
think we can, but we cannot. And if you are learning banking on some future where they're going to use some technology, you're just guessing and
yeah.
you could be shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, if you were learning something that AI was took over and was able to do, guess what? All that time is wasted.
Yeah.
So the more time that you spend learning and not actually making money, you're just harming yourself.
Yeah. That's a good point too, is that one of the things that AI cannot do is it cannot call local businesses and sell them websites, right?
Yeah.
It can't like make sales for you. It might be able to code a website, which to me that's also like a moot argument because I've never seen an AI that could code anything like that was like anything quality at all, and definitely not something that was like a larger code base. I mean, that would be like impossible. So but yeah, they can't interact with local businesses. They don't have soft skills, right? It's a computer system. It's a tool that's for developers that makes our lives easier. It's actually makes it easier to learn coding. But yeah, I think that's a great point. We need those skills as developers. So I
Well,
think
to
that's
that,
yeah, go
well, I was
ahead.
going to say to that point though, too, if you get comfortable first, because so many people I talk to nowadays are so uncomfortable talking to other people. They
Yeah.
lack the soft skills needed to excel on their own. And look, if you do freelance for a little while, you learn how to talk to people. So even if eventually you want to work for a company, you're going to be better positioned to talk to to the hiring
Yeah.
team. You're going to be more comfortable just talking to strangers, to doing
And
cold calls, things
and
like
your
that.
actual development team, because I
Yeah,
think that's huge too, is that
that too,
you need
right?
to be able to communicate with executives and your team, like your design team, all that stuff.
With everybody. And like I think this is one of the biggest challenges that developers face because a lot of them they'll be great developers, but they don't know how to do all these other things, so they're not successful. Whereas if you flip that, you do these things first, you can be successful doing anything. I mean, that's the beauty of it. Like these skills
Yeah,
transfer to everything else you're going to do in your life. So it makes sense to get them nailed down first.
totally. Totally.
Mhm.
Anything else you guys have in terms of like why coding is first is stupid? And let me say this too,
Well,
like if coding at first is stupid, what exactly would you suggest? And then at what point do you start coding?
I say I say one reason more why coding first is stupid is because it's the easy answer.
Yeah.
It's basic because if you look at developers, they're typically non-social people. And
Yes.
and it's easy to just go into your shell and just
Yeah.
go look from a book or a resource or whatever and just hang out on your computer. It's the easy solution.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get anywhere in life doing the easy thing. But you asked, what should you do first? I think 100%. I think you should get customers first because in the end, I mean, if anybody's in here not for the money, good for you. But I guarantee most people are here for the money and the freedom that the money will
Yeah.
give them. And so if you're doing something that's not getting you that money, you're wasting your time. So just go get the money first and then figure out what you need to do in order to get it done.
Yeah.
Not to mention
Learn
too,
faster too that way. When you have the pressure of like, hey, somebody already paid me, now I got to figure this out. That's that's how
oh,
you
dude,
learn faster.
that's also how you learn to solve real world problems and stuff because now you're facing the real world, right? It's not all hypothetical and made up and imaginary. You're
Yeah.
actually doing something and you actually have to finish it. That's the other
Yes.
thing. When you're just learning code just for the hell of it, a lot of people start and stop things all the time without finishing anything and
That's a
never
good
take it to
point.
conclusion because there's no there's no impetus or motivation to do so, right? And I think another reason why like learning coding first is stupid is because you just put yourself in a position to fail, I think. You make it easy. Instead of going out there and figuring out what you really want, learning the things that are going to help you succeed, learning design, learning how things go together. Because it's a huge coding is it's funny how like sometimes much it takes a shift in thinking to actually code a good website. You have to
Yeah.
break everything down to its smallest parts. Like I bring up that example you mentioned from one of the meetings you had where the guy was like, "Can you just put an edit button?"
Oh
Like,
my God.
like because
Yeah.
he wasn't a developer, right? So he just thought like,
Yeah.
you just put an edit button and that magically makes the whole page editable, right?
Yep.
But in reality, to do that requires like a ton of different steps to grab all that data, to do all these things,
Totally.
to shift, and it's like you have to learn how that process works first. And I think it makes you so much more successful moving forward.
Yeah. To elaborate on that story, because I think that's a good point, is um working for a startup, I was in like a design and development meeting, and um, you know, we were building like a dashboard, I think, and my boss basically was like, "Hey, we need to edit like this stuff and whatever." And I was like, "Okay." Asking him questions about how the edit button should function, whatever. And he's like, "No, no, no, just throw like one of those edit buttons on there and it'll all be good." I'm like, "That's not at all how it works." But this is, I think you make a good point, is that that's what this is all about, is understanding people's perception of coding, right?
Yeah.
Because you go through, and this is another good point. You brought this up, and I can't stress how true this is. I can't really even think of how many coding tutorials I started and got to a point where it got hard and I couldn't figure it out and I just quit and left it. And I think a lot of people do that, where they're like, they start a tutorial on YouTube or whatever it is, Udemy tutorial, and they get to a point where they're like, well, this doesn't work. Like this code is old or something like that. This tutorial's old. I can't like copy and paste this anymore. And they just give up. And that's one of the things that I think is so important about actually having to figure things out, is that, yeah, you have to take a project to completion. And that means, as developers, I always say this, our job is to be a problem solver. There's nothing like, that is literally the definition of being a software developer to me. It's not like what coding language you know or how many years of experience you have. It's how good are you at solving problems, because that's what your job is. It's somebody wants to build something and your job is to solve all the problems along the way to make it a thing, right?
Yeah.
And so like the better that you can get at doing that, the more valuable you will be as a software developer, the more dollars you can command from people. And so you're not going to get that by doing coding tutorials, because it's all done for you. All the problems are already solved. You don't have to do any of them on your own, and you don't have to take it to completion. So actually, like,
Now,
yeah, yeah,
oh, I was gonna say, not only that too, and a lot of those tutorials, they make you think too that like even if you do go to completion, that finishing that thing's complete, but you haven't launched it, it hasn't
right,
actually been put in production, you haven't done anything for security. Like all these things are real world issues that you have to deal with. And you need to
absolutely,
figure them out. You need to understand them ahead of time, what this whole process entails, so that you can like, because eventually too, when you do get clients and you're gonna code it yourself, you have to be able to tell them, okay, these are the steps, this is all that's involved, this is how
yeah,
long it's going to take. And if you don't know what all those are, guess what? You're gonna have no idea.
yeah. I think that's something you brought up another good point, and that is like I get this a lot when somebody comes to me and they have like something they want to be developed. One of the first things they're going to ask you is, how many hours of development is this going to take? And this is something that I struggled a lot with when I was first starting out, because like I've talked to my girlfriend about this a lot, because it's really hard to determine how many hours it's going to take you to build something based off of like a couple, like a Figma file or like a couple screens, right?
Oh, dude, it's really
Especially when,
difficult. Yeah.
yeah, and especially when you don't have a lot of actual experience coding your own on your own, right? When you're just doing tutorials, you're just following along, and it's basically as streamlined as possible. I mean, you think about it, some coding tutorials are like 4 or 5 hours to code an entire app, but it's already written. Like they're just coding at the speed of lightning,
Yeah.
and that's not realistic, right? Like coding takes a lot. It's a process of like, build this, then make it responsive, then add animations, then add a back end, then be able to edit the back end, right? All these different things. And so the more real world experience you have, the more that you can actually help people when it comes down to that stuff. Like, because they're going to ask you, how many hours will it take you to code this? And if you never built something on your own, it's going to be pretty freaking hard to like figure out how many hours, development hours, it's actually going to take you.
Yeah. And another note too, I think, ask yourself, anybody watching this, ask yourself, listening to this, how many of those tutorials did they actually run into a problem and solve it in the
Yeah.
tutorial?
And
Because guess what? If they didn't, then it was pre-designed and false,
yeah,
and like that's
I've
not a
even
real world
seen some
experience.
tutorials where they do that, but it's like you can tell it's scripted into that. They're like, "Oh, something's not working. This is it." And they like
Yeah.
know the answer already. And it's like, yeah, they're trying to simulate a problem, but that's not what happens, right? Like I was just coding something with Drew, who's been on the show before, right? And it's like we were developing a Web3 app, and literally in the middle of development, we're using like a Web3 auth API. And in the middle of developing this app, the actually Web3 auth changed their code, like their own API code. They changed. So everything on our end broke because they just changed their code, right? And that's a real world problem that you're going to run into. And there's no tutorial that's going to like teach you how to fix that on your own. That comes only from real world experience. And you're
Yeah.
going to get these things faster if you start getting real world work first, right? Because I've talked to plenty of people in this group too, who's like, we look over their portfolio, and their portfolio is just full of work that's clearly tutorials. That's it. And there's no real world work. And so you want to get that stuff as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Any final words, you guys? 'Cause I
Yeah,
think
so I just
yeah.
want to speak to the people out there who, you've been coding for a while, you're stuck in tutorial hell, you're circling, orbiting around the direction you want to go. You've been doing this for a long time. You want to be a developer. It just doesn't seem real. You're stuck in a job you don't like. You're broke. You don't have a job. You're living in your parents' house, some situation where you don't want to be. Well, guess what? This year can be your year. And the coolest thing is that we're here for you. So we have a program called Web Dev Incubator. You can find out more about it by going to codenoobs.io/mentoring. But just to give you an idea, what we do is we get you work as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Oftentimes in a couple months or less. We've seen it in as little as a week. And so what can happen is you start working with us, you start getting paid. And then guess what? Paying for Web Dev Incubator, that comes out of your client's pocket. And then any more clients you get, that's more money for you, and you get to learn coding while you're doing that. So we offer that with the program. The prices that we're offering it for now will not be there forever, because right now we are finishing up our beta. And once that is complete, prices will be increasing for that. So you definitely want to check it out. Get on the phone with one of us so you can talk with us, so we can answer your questions. And that way you can stop orbiting around and wondering when it's going to happen, and actually make it happen this year.
Can I add one thing to that too? Yeah,
Mhm.
look into any other program, any other boot camp, any other college, and ask yourself, are they going to get me working while I'm learning to pay for this? And chances are it's no, because I've
Yeah.
never seen one in my
Are they
life.
going to guarantee that they'll get you
Yeah,
work? No,
Yeah.
but we do.
I think that's the
yeah,
biggest thing. I mean, if you guys are genuinely committed to becoming a developer, I know there's a lot of people that like dance around the topic, and that's fine. If you want to dance around becoming a developer for the next few years, that's fine. Like I did that for years, and you know, best wishes to you guys, but I think there's a lot of people in this group who are actually committed to becoming a developer, and that's what they want for themselves. They want to change their life. If that's you and you're listening to this, now's the time to take action, right? This won't be here forever. This offer of, as cheap as it is not going to be here forever. And you're not going to find the guarantees that we have. We have two amazing guarantees, which are really going to help you guys become a developer this year in the next 12 months. First one is join us. If you don't like it in 30 days, just let us know and we'll give you your money back. Like, we're not here to steal people's money. We're actually here to build the next generation of amazing developers. The second guarantee is if you don't find work as a developer, and as a developer, not at Starbucks, by the way,
yeah,
in the first 12 months of working with us, you continue working with us for absolutely free until you find work, right? Our goal is to make you the next generation of amazing developers. There's enough like crappy developers out there in the world None of us like need your money, but we need you to be committed to this. And that's why we charge for it. Otherwise, we would do this completely free in the group. But we've seen, like, we know, everybody knows that if you're not committed, I mean, how many free tutorials are there on YouTube that you're not doing right now, right? How much accountability are you not having with yourself? Because it's free and there's no need to like be accountable. Once you have skin in the game, then your accountability goes way up. And that's how to find a job for yourself in the next 12 months as a developer. So if you're interested, join us. We have some great students in there and we're onboarding many at a time now, but we are limiting this to only a couple per month. So go ahead, Randall.
Interesting story before we go. So
Yeah.
I personally strongly believe in having skin in the game, putting money in something to learn it. Now, I've been
Yeah.
working to study for this very comprehensive cybersecurity exam called the OSCP, which is basically your golden ticket. You have this, anybody will employ you because they know you have what it takes. But it's exceptionally hard. Most people don't pass it on the first try. So I've been studying for it. It's a lot. I said, you know what? Put my money where my mouth is. I signed up for a boot camp, way more expensive than what we charge for our boot camp. But
Yeah.
I signed up for the boot camp and they don't guarantee anything. You take this boot camp, you pay a bunch of money, they don't guarantee that you pass the exam.
Yeah.
No accountability on their end. But
Yeah.
what we do is we do offer that accountability. And I think that's one thing that separates us and anybody. I mean, we wanted to make this offer so crazy that anybody who didn't take it would have to be crazy. And,
For real.
so
Yeah.
All right. So thank you guys for tuning in again. As you can tell, we love accountability. We're here every Saturday at 9 a.m. So tune in next Saturday at 9 a.m. We'll be here bright and early with another great topic. And if you are interested in the Web Dev Incubator, we'd love to have you inside the group. It is a private group, so you get access to us and all that good stuff. You can just go to codenoobs.io/mentoring or just reach out to one of us on Facebook, and we'd be happy to give you some details about how it all works. Otherwise, if you are in Web Dev Incubator, we will see you in about a half hour for our 2-hour mentoring session that we have every week right after this call. So thanks again for tuning in. I hope you guys have a great Saturday, and we will see you next week. Peace.
Later.